Well, well, well. Just when you thought zombies couldn't get any more mainstream than they already are, we get this little ditty coming at us over on Disney Plus. Welcome back to the Grindhouse, everyone. Groovy here, and consider this your spoiler warning, because today we're going to be talking about the zombie episode of Marvel's What If? What If being an anthology series on Disney Plus, which features a series of various cosmic misfires set in the MCU multiverse, which tend to play out in some very dark and interesting ways. This story specifically is a loose adaptation of the Marvel Zombies stories from the comics, but again viewed through the lens of the MCU, and actually starts out being set up right at the beginning of Infinity War, when Bruce Banner is still body locked inside of that body and falls to the earth, hoping to warn the Avengers of the impending invasion of the Mad Titan Thanos. But instead, he crash lands in a deserted Sanctum Sanctorum and realizes that he's landed just a few days after a zombie virus outbreak, when he's attacked by zombie versions of Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Wong. Luckily, he's rescued by human survivors Wasp and Spider-Man, and we learn that in this universe, the undead infection was unleashed by Hank Pym when he traveled to the quantum realm looking for his wife Janet, who, unbeknownst to him, had been infected by the virus and succumbed to it after being trapped there years before. And when Hank and Janet return from the quantum realm, they immediately attack an unsuspecting Ant-Man and unleash a full-blown zombie apocalypse. As I said before, this episode is a really loose adaptation of the story from the Marvel Zombies comic books. One, because it's in the MCU, and two, that's because a lot of the characters and the elements from the Marvel Zombies story don't really exist yet in the MCU. There's no Sentry, there's no Fantastic Four, so it was really intriguing to me to see how they had tried to adapt the story elements to the MCU version, right? There were definitely some times where they referenced specific elements from the comics as well, and I thought that the way that they used some characters in place of others, like Wanda and Vision, was great. Not just for an emotional impact, but also as like a shout out to the people that had read the comic books and kind of knew where the origins of that scene came from, right? But that does bring me to a point that I'd like to make straight away. And that is that this is Marvel Zombies Light, you know? This is the diet version of Marvel Zombies. This is Marvel Zombies set in the confines of the MCU sensibilities, which means not only no blood, no guts, no intense visceral gore, which is definitely a shame, but the real shame is the fact that these are just standard zombies and some of them have superpowers. These aren't the tortured souls that thoughts are consumed by a gnawing hunger infection that's taken control of their mind and turned them into something. There's no moments of clarity where these zombies can make plans. They're just standard zombies when a couple of them have superpowers, and that's a huge shame. You don't get to see the true threat of the Marvel Zombies from the comics explored in this episode. And while I do respect this episode for what it's trying to accomplish, especially in regards to shifting elements from the comic books into the MCU landscape, I do feel like this was a missed opportunity to see some really fucked up shit, right? Like, if they really had the stones, how sick would it have been to see Hope's gigantic skeleton after it had been picked clean by a horde of flesh eaters, right? That's the kind of stuff you're not going to get to see from Disney Marvel. They even have the scene where T'Challa gets captured and slowly butchered by one of the zombies and eaten, and that's straight from the comic books. But it's so breezy that it doesn't really hit home before we're already moving on to the next thing. So while I did enjoy this episode immensely, I was a little bit disappointed, but all in all, I thought it was great. I just wanted a little bit more gore, a little bit more splatter, and I wanted the intelligent zombies instead of the garden variety zombies that you get from the MCU. I know that you're not going to get something that's that intense and visceral on Disney Plus, but there were some dark themes and stories in some of the other episodes of What If so far, so I was kind of hoping that they'd go for it. You know what I mean? The real threat of the Marvel zombies in the comics isn't just the fact that the zombies, it's the fact that they're intelligent. Right? Not only do they have superpowers, but they can think. And when they eat flesh, it lets the hunger subside. And instead of being clouded by the desire to just eat everything in sight, they revert back to their mostly normal selves for the most part. And that creates a really interesting dynamic where they go out and they kill and they're bloodthirsty, but then they come back to their senses and they regret what they're doing. It also gives them enough clarity to make plans that makes them extremely dangerous and something different than just standard paranormal style zombies that, like I said, a couple of them have superpowers. I feel like that's the real threat of the Marvel zombies, and that's something that would have been amazing to see explored. But again, MCU sensibilities, so that's not something that we get here. I just think that it's a shame when you think of what could have been, right? Imagine zombie Hawkeye taking out zombie teeth and attaching them to his arrows and then shooting them into some of the survivors to infect them from a distance just to cause chaos. That's the kind of stuff that they do in the comics that you're never going to get to see. You're never going to get to see Magneto as one of the last human survivors taking on an army of zombified Marvel superheroes. That's how the comic book opens up, and I always thought that that was extremely poetic because here you have this villain and he's fighting off all of these heroes that have succumbed to this virus. I thought it was really cool, and there was that great scene where Hulk swallows his leg whole and then turns back into Bruce Banner, and then the unchewed leg bursts forth from Bruce Banner's distended stomach. Gross! Definitely not something we're going to see on Disney Plus, but also pretty damn awesome, right? So instead of seeing zombie Ant-Man bite the head off of zombie Wasp out of anger, we get to see Paul Rudd Ant-Man as a disembodied head, and he makes dad jokes and Harry Potter references. And I love Paul Rudd, so we're gonna let that slide. But that's good because the strength of a good zombie story is the human element. It's the human characters inside the story that you care about. And this episode gets to draw from the well of the MCU, and that ain't too bad. And while this is mainly a story for Wasp, Spider-Man, and Hulk, we do get to see a lot of side characters from the MCU pop up to help populate the ranks of the zombie fodder, right? Like we get to see characters like Kurt, the Baba Yaga guy from Ant-Man, and we get to see Happy Hogan, the chauffeur from Iron Man. It's always great to see those characters, and those characters really shine in some of the light horror tone that the episode tends to dip into. But then there are other characters like Bucky and Okoye who pop up, and they don't really add much to the story and are just kind of there. They're not as effective because their characters don't really fit in with the tone as much. And let's not even bring up Sharon Carter. She's there. She's mostly useless. It's very, very sad if you're a fan of Sharon Carter. And it's just a shame that for this episode to exist, that means that it has to be a mostly bloodless affair. Like, all of that zombie biting action is going to happen off screen. It's all going to be obscured by dust and shadow if you're going to see anything. And as a gorehound, I have to say that's just super lame. All in all, though, not bad. I didn't enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed the Doctor Strange episode that came before it, but that's a topic for a completely different video. Maybe we'll do a video about that episode too. Here's hoping. I do feel like this was a worthy episode to the Marvel What If series, even though at the same time, I feel like it was definitely a missed opportunity in terms of bringing that real visceral horror of the Marvel Zombies threat to the screen. Like I said, this is still Zombies Light, and I respect them for trying, but I still want to see that leg burst out of Hulk's stomach when Zombie Hulk reverts to Zombie Bruce Banner. That's the kind of sick shit that I want to see. Is that too much to ask? And we don't get to see that, but the MCU stuff that they put in works really well. Like the stinger at the very end of the episode, I loved that. That definitely left me wanting more, and it left me curious as to whether they were going to continue the story of this episode. But let me know what you guys think. Did you guys enjoy this episode? Did it meet your expectations for What If? Did it meet your expectations for a Marvel Zombies story on the screen? Sound off in the comments section below. If you made it to the end of the video, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe to the channel, make sure to follow me on Twitch as well. We're gonna put that link in the video description. Until next time, stay scared, people, but stay groovy. We outie.